Hard to believe, folks, but we're in week 5. Greetings from Long Beach, California, where it's probably significantly warmer than it is wherever you're watching this. Just a quick video to talk to you a little bit about our transition that we're going through right now between the resume and cover letter assignment and the technical review. First, I'd just like to thank you for the work that you put into the resume and cover letter assignment. I really appreciate it, and I know that it will be time well spent for you, so please make sure that you take a look at the feedback that I supplied through email regarding the cover letters. Virtually everybody in the class can benefit from that feedback. If you actualize that feedback and you make it part of your cover letter, I'm convinced that you'll have a cover letter that accentuates your resume, that highlights your unique selling propositions, that is the things that make you really an attractive candidate, and they'll really solidify a strong writing sample for you. So that should be great, and I look forward to seeing those in final draft form. Just make sure that you spend time revising. Just because something is good enough doesn't mean that it's great. You know what I mean? So go in there and fine-tune the language, play around with things, try the best that you can to get it to a point where you feel like you can make very little forward progress. If you get there, then you're probably in a pretty good spot. And when I go through and evaluate those, I will give you additional feedback so that if you're inclined to revise again, either for a higher grade or just for professional development and practical purposes, then that should be great. So as you probably know by now, we're transitioning into our second major writing assignment of the semester, which is a technical product review. And this assignment it can be a really fun one, and it's one that gets us writing in sort of a totally different format and genre and for a totally different purpose. Instead of trying to sell yourself to a potential employer, now you're going to provide a really objective assessment of your experiences with the product. And so part of what we're going to do this week is we're going to look at some examples, and I really want you to become comfortable sort of reverse engineering a piece of writing or a type of writing and asking yourself, what is this piece of writing doing? What does it sound like? How is it put together? What can I learn from this? And so you've got a couple of examples that you can do that to this week. You can look at the student example, and you can look at the professionally written example about the Beats by Dr. Dre headphones. In both cases, I think you'll see that there are some real strong commonalities. One is something I just alluded to. Reviews are meant to be objective, so you're not trying to sell me whatever the product is that you're assessing in this. What I would much prefer is that you provide an honest and objective perspective about its performance. So I think that that's one of the key things that I need to remind students of, that the purpose of this isn't to get somebody else to buy it necessarily, but it's to share your honest experience with the product. So you'll see that that's one commonality. Another commonality between them is that typically reviews are organized around a series of requirements or criteria, the thing that the product needs to do to be successful. So, if we're talking about work boots, there's a certain set of criteria that a pair of work boots has to meet. They have to be comfortable, they have to be durable, they have to be waterproof, they have to be insulated, whatever it is. And of course, and we'll add some complication to that in a second, and of course, that's sort of the backbone of the review. We need to look at those individual criteria, and we need to develop assessments about those individual criteria, and that's going to help us. So you'll notice that in the tent review, it talks about durability and how easy it was to put up and those types of things. Of course, price is going to play into this. So one of the first things I want you to do is, of course, pick a product that you want to review, and it can be something from a hobby or something from your career. It doesn't matter to me. And then I want you to think about, what does it have to do to be a successful product? So what are the criteria that you're looking for? Certainly price is one. Durability is pretty common. Comfort, those types of things. Power, battery life. It really depends on the product that you're looking at. So, that's another commonality. So you've got to be objective. You've got to drive it with criteria. If you look closely, another thing that you'll find is that assessments are supported by evidence in each. So you're not just going to say, oh, these boots are really durable, or it's a really powerful drill, or whatever. You're going to support that with evidence. And in a review, we're really talking about 3 types of evidence primarily. First and foremost, we're talking about your personal experience. So how did the product perform under your use conditions? So, if you worked masonry and you had a pair of work boots, tell us how they performed. Where did they really excel? What areas maybe did they have limitations? And that's really going to help us understand how that particular product performs. So personal experience is really critical. It's another place where, similar to your cover letter, you can show instead of tell. Rather than just telling me how something performed, you can show me. And that's going to to be much more meaningful because I'm going to be able to fully appreciate and understand what that looked like. So certainly personal experience. Another source is technical specifications. And so by that I mean you can talk about how the thing is actually put together and engineered. So you might talk about things like proprietary technology, so technology unique to that product. You might talk about its technical specifications, things like its weight, its power rating, those types of things. You might talk about specialized materials, but that's also a form of evidence. So, but be careful there because in just a second I'm going to talk to you about jargon. You want to make sure that those things are meaningful to the reader. You don't want to just sort of throw a lot of data and jargon at them and expect that they're going to be able to interpret and make sense of that. So that's certainly another thing. So we can use personal experience and technical specifications. And then the final thing is also really important, and you'll see that both of the reviews do this to some degree. Probably both could do it better, and that's comparisons. So making apples to apples type comparisons between products. So how did work boot A perform against work boot B? Where did it separate itself? How did it compare in terms of price, durability, traction, those types of things? And that's really going to help us understand and contextualize how that thing's performing. So that's another commonality. So this is a habit of mind I really want you to develop. You're going to be asked to write in formats in your career that or genres, or you're going to have do writing that you've never done before. And it's really important for me as your writing instructor this semester that you sort of have the wherewithal to be able to figure it out, to reverse engineer an example that you found. And so one of the things that I want you to do is to always look for commonalities. So if somebody asks you to write a particular type of report, maybe get your hands on that type of report and look at it, or maybe look at a couple of them and ask yourself, what are the things that this absolutely has to have to be an incident report, for instance? What are the things that are absolutely always part of an incident report? And then you can always bounce that off your audience and say, well, knowing that, what can I do to make my audience's job easier as a reader? So take a close look at those two example reviews, and I think you'll be able to really orient yourself well to the writing task. So one of the things that I just alluded to that I think is really critical is this idea of jargon, and it's something we're going to deal with all semester, but this assignment in particular I think really helps us negotiate that, or forces us to negotiate that. So one of the really cool things about teaching at the community college level is that each and every one of you is here gaining a specialized knowledge, and so with that knowledge comes unique language, and it kind of makes you a part of an individual culture, and each culture kind of has its own way of talking about things. So it's not uncommon for me to walk through the Whitney wing of the Fry building and hear people talking about their trade or their discipline, and I have no idea half the time what they're talking about. And that's because part of becoming educated and learning is gaining a new vocabulary. And now, one of the things I want you to be really mindful of, and I think this is a shortcoming of a lot of writing that I see, is that not everybody has that same vocabulary. And this is going to be particularly true for you when you deal with vendors or clients or customers or coworkers who work in a different area. And so one of the things that I feel compelled to teach you in this class is how to overcome jargon. And so the first couple of readings that you're going to do this week are really going to help you get there. And they're going to help you write definitions, because part of the time that's all we have to do. We just have to provide some frame of reference so the person understands what we're talking about when we say, this has 4 gigabytes of RAM, for instance. It's going to help them understand what that means. One way to think about this is to talk about benefits instead of features. And so, for instance, I could talk, if I were reviewing a lawnmower, for instance, or if I sold lawnmowers, if I worked on lawnmowers, I might say something like, this has a 3.5 horsepower Briggs & Stratton motor with overhead valves, or something like that. I'm not even really 100% sure what that means. But to the average person, that's just jargon. That's just it's like you're speaking a different language to them. They might have some sense of what it means, but instead of residing at that level of talking about it as a feature, we can turn that into a benefit. And so we can talk about what that actually means on the ground. What is the significance to the actual user or the actual person? And it could mean that it provides enough power that you can mow even the thickest, heaviest grass in the wettest conditions and not have to worry about bogging down and stalling, and it's going to mulch things up into a dust. And so as you're writing your reviews, keep that in mind. that every piece of language that you use in that review should be transparent to the reader. The reader should fully be able to grasp what you're saying to them. So if you're talking about proprietary technology in a piece of equipment or whatever, make sure that you explain what that is and what it means to the reader. I talk to employers a lot, and this is one of the things that they tell me is that folks can be the greatest technician. Technically, they can be so savvy. But when it comes to communicating complex information to an audience of non-experts, they really struggle. And so one of the things I want you to practice throughout this semester, and you're going to have to do it in this assignment and in the instructions and in the safety fact sheet, is just to be very cognizant of the language that you're using. And try to make sure that the language is as simple and as plain as it possibly can be. And the beauty of that is that it's going to cast a really wide net. There are cases where it is absolutely unavoidable. We have to use a piece of specialized or technical language, but it's really important for us to be able to provide alternative ways of understanding that information, whether that be a definition or a quick explanation, or simply just framing something as a benefit rather than a feature. It's going to serve you well. It's going to make you a much sort of more heralded employee, and it's going to help you get your job done without any confusion or any sort of hiccups. So that's really what we're up to this week, and so I hope that you spend the time to take a close look at those technical reviews, to read the materials about overcoming jargon, and I think that this assignment can be, as I said, really fun. So as you're working on it, remember what we're basically trying to do is make a series of mini arguments. Okay, we're going to make arguments about each of the individual criteria, and that's going to kind of come together as an overall assessment of the product. So, if for instance we're writing about work boots, we might say these are the most comfortable work boots I've ever owned, and then we're going to provide evidence to support that claim. So part of that evidence might be, here's how I use them and here's how they performed. Part of that evidence might be they're really comfortable for these reasons. They're really breathable, they have a really soft insulation, whatever it is, they have a really adaptable sort of architect, whatever it is. And then certainly you can compare them to other boots. And so you should try to do that for every single one of the criteria that you've identified. And if you do this, then you're basically going to be doing something that I will say a lot this semester. You're going to be anticipating and answering readers' questions before they have the chance to ask them. And that's really the mark of good writing, is when somebody reads something and they put it down and they feel really satisfied, where they feel like most of their questions have been answered. And so have fun with it. Write about something that you care about, something that you have a lot of experience with. And it shouldn't be that difficult of an assignment, but I think that if you do it right, you're going to learn a lot along the way, because you're going to learn how to write really concise and well-structured paragraphs. You're going to learn how to support claims with evidence. You're going to learn how to assess something in sort of an objective and methodical way. You're going to learn how to overcome jargon, and those are really important things. Those are things that are going to build us into our next assignment. So even though I'm out of town, I will be responsive to both text and email, so feel free to hit me up if you need anything. And again, make sure that you spend adequate time in the revision phase on your resume and cover letters. It's time well spent. I can't tell you how many times I've had students who invested the time and effort into those assignments and turned those into jobs that they were really interested in. So I look forward to seeing what you make of that assignment. And again, if you need anything at all, I'm here to help. Thanks a lot.